The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Jesus said to his disciples, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give it to you. Do not let your hearts be troubled or afraid. You heard me tell you, I am going away, and I will come back to you. If you loved me, you would rejoice that I am going to the Father, for the Father is greater than I. And now I have told you this before it happens, so that when it happens, you may believe. I will no longer speak much with you, for the ruler of the world is coming. He has no power over me, but the world must know that I love the Father, and that I do just as the Father has commanded me." The Gospel of the Lord.
My dear friends in Christ, I'm grateful to God that we are here this afternoon and that you have been so hospitable to us over the past couple of days and will be in days to come as we're here for a workshop and discovering and discerning what God has in mind for us as we discuss vocations to the priesthood in the African American Catholic community. So please pray that we may be successful and that many more young men will respond to the call of Jesus to love this and serve the church as a priest. There's no doubt the context in which much of this discussion is taking place is the economy. As we know, we're living in very tough times. A lot of people are out of work, and a lot of people have lost their homes, and people are still looking for work. Many people are still looking for work. So these are tough economic times. Whenever there are times like this, it provides a context for much of our discussion and gives it a particular flavor. We also look for previous times when there were such difficulties, especially the time of the Great Depression, and looking back to kind of discover and look and examine what they went through, what lessons we can learn, and what mistakes we can avoid. As we look back at the Great Depression, there's one legacy that remains in a positive way. There were many great movies and books and plays written during that time that chronicle the lives of people who were going through that period of travail and those hardships. And some of those movies and plays are still around today. As a matter of fact, on cable television, from time to time in the classical music movie channel, you find some of those plays featured, and they have such a compelling message, and they are so entertaining that they're watched even today. One such movie is Sullivan's Travels, which you may be aware of. Sullivan's Travels featured the actor Joel McCrea and the actress Veronica Lake. It's a story of a young, ambitious Hollywood director who decides that he's tired of making films about what he imagines to be the true, and he wants to make an authentic film about the travails real people are going through in USA during the Great Depression. And he decides that the only way he can do this is to experience what people are experiencing. So he announced to his family and to his friends, his business, that he's going to live on the streets of Hollywood to discover what real people are going through. So what he does, he would a single dime in his pocket, and in hobo's clothing, he goes out and leaves his Hollywood mansion, his valet and chauffeur, and his maid and butler. He leaves all these people, says goodbye to them, and sets out to live on the streets of Los Angeles and Hollywood. This misadventure goes on well for a couple of weeks, but after weeks of soup kitchens and standing in line for shelter in a homeless shelter, he meets a young woman, an aspiring actress who's played by Veronica Lake, and she's on the streets because she can't find work. And after this round of soup kitchens and round of shelters and boxcars on railroads, he finds that it's much rougher than he ever imagined. He's mugged, he is arrested, he loses his identity, he loses his memory, and he almost loses his life. The young woman that he meets saves him from prison when she identifies him and tells the police who he really is, his true identity, and he returns therefore to his home and to his previous life of making films. I don't know about you, but when I saw this movie for the first time, when I read the script, I saw striking parallels between this man's, John Sullivan's, adventures and those of Jesus Christ, who came into this world to be one like us. Jesus decides, in a moment in history, to leave his Father's side, to leave scepter and crown. He decides to come to the earth to be one like us in all things, as St. Paul would say, but sin. And his identity is so concealed that very few, if any, recognize who he is, for he is identified only as a carpenter's son, as a son of Mary, as someone who lives in Nazareth, the poor, obscure town of Nazareth. It was only at the end of his life, when he's dying on the cross, that the centurion kneels down before him and says, "Truly this man was the Son of God." His identity was carefully hidden. His divinity was veiled. The Godhead was unseen only by those with the faith to see it. Now, in the same way today, Jesus lives in the church as he lived back then. In the early church, as we see from the Acts of the Apostles, which chronicles what the church was like when it was in its first beginning, in the early church there was keen awareness that Jesus in his spirit, with the capital S, was alive and active in the church, was moving, was a major actor in the church, that he was there. We should capture that same feeling that Jesus is with us in his church. He is with us now, not only in church, not only in worship, but in everything we do, so that when we sit and discuss, sit in classrooms, when we sit in dialogue, when we work outside or play outside, Jesus is there with us, carefully disguised and concealed. A few very good Christians in our own day and in the past among the saints were able to penetrate that disguise and see Jesus as he really is. Mother Teresa was one of those lucky Christians. She spoke many times of how, after they were rounding up the very poor and destitute from the gutters of Calcutta, and as you know by now that Calcutta had very few shelters for the homeless, Mother Teresa and her sisters every morning would go into the gutters in Calcutta and round up all those who were left the night before, too sick and destitute, left to die. There's one story of Mother Teresa and her sisters rounding up all those who were left the night before, and they brought them to their convent to care for them. At least they would be given the chance to die with dignity in a warm bed. Mother Teresa, there was one particular man who was quite wretched. He had many sores, and he was quite dirty. And Mother Teresa said, "I'll take care of him." And so she took care of him. She put him in bed. She took care of his sores. When she had taken care of him and put the man to some sense of rest and tranquility, she stood up and she made a profound bow to the man, and she announced to all those around her that, "I have just seen the face of God. I have just seen the face of God." She was able to penetrate that veil, to look beyond the disguise, and to see Jesus as he really is. Because when Jesus walked the face of the earth, the Godhead was in disguise. The divinity was hidden. It was only until the end of his life, when he hung upon the cross, that the centurion had the courage to stand up and say, "Truly this man was the Son of God." And so, my friends, for us it means that Jesus is still in the midst today. He's still among us. He still acts and talks and walks among us. And how do we know this? Because he said in St. Matthew's Gospel, towards the end of the Gospel, he gave the parable about the Last Judgment. And he said, "The Son of Man at the Last Judgment will be seated on his throne," meaning himself. There will be people on his right and on his left. And to those on his right he will say, "Come, blessed of my Father, come into heaven. For I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was naked and you clothed me. I was homeless, you took me in. I was in prison and sick and you came to visit me." And they will say, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and thirsty? And when did we see you away from home and welcome you? When did we see you naked and clothe you?" And so on. He says, "As long as you did it for the very least, you did it for me." And to those on his left, he would say, "Away from me, you accursed, because I was hungry, you did not feed me, thirsty, you did not give me drink. I was naked, you did not clothe me. Away from home, you did not take me in. I was sick and in prison, you did not visit me." And they would say, "When did we see you like this?" And he would say, "As long as you didn't do it, for the very least, you didn't do it for me." So we have our marching orders. We have the instructions given to us in the gospel by Jesus himself to look for Jesus in the most unlikely of places, and to look with him in eyes of faith and with eyes of courage. And when we find him, to treat him so that he is as he is God now, so that when he comes as our judge, we may welcome him, as our liturgy says. And this be our prayers and our hope.